Mom, it's just easier without you in the family chat. You make things heavier. My daughter Sarah said it so casually, as if she wasn't erasing me from our family picture. She didn't even look up, just kept stirring her coffee, her phone face down like the whole thing meant nothing. Mom, please don't make this into something dramatic. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. When she left, I picked up my own phone with hands that weren't as steady as they used to be. One tap, and the screen opened to the chat I had been part of for years. Birthdays, holidays, little moments I once believed kept us close. My name wasn't there anymore. Where it used to say Lydia, Sarah, Mark, Michael, Laura, Emma, Noah, it now listed only their names. The little group icon had changed too. No longer the old photo someone had taken in my backyard, me in the middle, children and grandchildren gathered around. Now it was a picture of them all at the beach last summer, standing in a bright line at the edge of the water. I wasn't in it. It felt as if someone had quietly cut me out and smoothed the edges, so no one would notice the gap but me. I set the phone down on the kitchen table. The tea in my mug had gone cold. Outside, a delivery truck rumbled past, and somewhere in the house a clock ticked on, indifferent. Less drama, Sarah had said earlier, when I asked her why. Less guilt if we can't answer. Everyone's so busy, Mom. You understand. I nodded at the time, because that's what I'd always done, understand, make excuses, tell myself not to be so sensitive. But what they didn't know was that this wasn't the first time I'd felt myself being quietly moved to the edge of my own family. My name is Lydia. I was 72 years old when this happened, and I had spent most of my life making myself small so my children could take up more space. I thought losing my place in that little circle on a screen was the worst part. I was wrong. Because that empty space on my phone would lead me to post one last photo, a picture from a different time, that none of them were prepared to see. If you've ever felt quietly erased by your own family, stay with me, you need to hear what happened next. The family chat hadn't always felt like a place where I didn't belong. When Sarah first set it up, she stood in my living room with Emma on her hip. Emma couldn't have been more than 3. Mom, look, Sarah had said. This way you'll see pictures right away. No more waiting for prints. She took my phone and tapped quickly, her fingers more comfortable on the screen than mine had ever been. A few minutes later, a photo popped up, a blurry shot of Noah holding a soccer trophy, his cheeks flushed with pride. See, she smiled. Now you're right there with us. Back then, every ping felt like a small gift. A cupcake topped with too much frosting. Noah's crooked grin at Halloween. Emma asleep in her car seat, clutching a stuffed elephant. Silly little videos from the backseat of the car. For a long time, I believed those little sounds meant I still had a place in their everyday lives. I didn't realize how quietly that place could shrink. As the years went by, the messages changed. The photos came less often. The chat turned into a bulletin board, running late, can't make dinner, we'll call you later, Mom. The emojis stayed. The warmth thinned out. Sometimes entire days went by without a single ping. I told myself everyone was busy. That's what people said at church, too, when they talked about grown children who hardly visited. They're busy, you know. Work. The kids. We all said it like a prayer that might keep our hearts from breaking. One Sunday afternoon, I sent a photo to the family chat. It was my kitchen table, set the way I used to when the kids were still at home, Emma's favorite chocolate chip cookies on one plate, Noah's lemon bars on another, my old blue tablecloth underneath. Snacks are ready if anyone wants to stop by after church, I wrote. The message showed seen under Sarah's name. Then under Michael's. Then, nothing. An hour later, a new photo appeared, but not from me. It was Sarah's living room, the children sprawled on the floor in front of a movie, popcorn buckets in their hands. Lazy day at home, she wrote. We're all worn out. I stared at the screen, then at the untouched cookies cooling on my counter. The house was so quiet I could hear the tick of the clock in the hallway. That was the first time I wrapped up fresh cookies and put them straight into the freezer. I told myself it was practical. I didn't admit it also hurt. Another time, in early December, I sent a message asking what the kids wanted for Christmas. "Gift cards are fine, Mom," Michael replied. "They like choosing their own stuff now." I had already bought Emma a doll that looked just like her, dark hair, a sprinkle of freckles. I kept the doll anyway. I tucked her into the back of my closet, still in her box, like a secret I was embarrassed to show anyone. Little things kept piling up, one on top of the other, until they didn't feel so little anymore. Easter came. I offered to host lunch, like I had for decades. "Thanks, Mom," Sarah wrote in the chat, "but we're trying something new this year. Just the 4 of us at home. Less chaos for the kids." Michael texted separately. "Same here, Mom. Laura's family invited us this time. Maybe next year." I cooked a small roast for myself that Sunday. The chat lit up with photos: Sarah's glazed ham, Emma in bunny ears, Noah in someone else's backyard hunting eggs. I scrolled through them at my kitchen table, the smell of my lonely lunch still hanging in the air. I thought that was the worst of it. I was wrong. The breaking point came on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon. Emma had stopped by after school because Sarah needed to work late. She sat at my kitchen table, her backpack slumped by the chair, a half-eaten apple beside her notebook. She was showing me a video of Noah's last soccer game on her phone. When the video ended, she tapped the screen, and a list of chats slid into view. I wasn't trying to snoop. My eyes just landed there before I could look away. There it was, family chat, no drama. Underneath the title were the tiny circles of Sarah's, Michael's, Laura's, and Mark's faces. My face wasn't there. Emma didn't notice my silence. "Did you see when he almost fell?" she giggled, replaying the clip. "He's so dramatic." When she went to the bathroom, my gaze drifted back to the spot on the table where her phone had been. My own phone lay there too, screen dark, exactly where I'd set it earlier. I picked it up and opened the family chat, the old one, the one I was still in. No new messages. The last one was from 3 days ago, a picture of Noah's science fair project. I had sent a little heart emoji. No one had replied. Something in me tightened, then quietly gave way. It wasn't a loud crack, the kind that brings the ceiling down. It was more like the sound of a thin thread snapping after being pulled too tight for too long. That night, after Emma went home, I sat in my armchair and looked around my living room. On the bookshelf were framed photos from years ago: Sarah in her prom dress, Michael holding up his first paycheck, Emma as a baby in my arms, her tiny fist clutching my blouse. In every picture, I was there. Sometimes in the center, sometimes blurred in the background, but always present. Holding, cooking, driving, listening. Somewhere along the way, I had become the person in the picture everyone assumed would always be there, whether she was invited or not. The clock on my nightstand ticked loudly that night. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to time pass. In the dark, I heard my mother's voice as if she were sitting on the edge of my bed again. "Lydia, don't make yourself smaller just so others can feel bigger." Back then, I used to roll my eyes at her old sayings. That night, the words landed differently. I began to realize how much of my life I had built around waiting. Waiting for calls. Waiting for text messages. Waiting for invitations that might or might not come. Waiting for proof that I still mattered. The next morning, I poured myself a cup of tea and sat by the window. Cars drove past. A neighbor walked his dog. The world went about its business. For the first time in a long time, I asked myself a question I'd been afraid to think. What if I stopped organizing my whole day around the chance that someone might need me? The thought scared me. It also felt strangely light. I pulled out a dusty shoebox from the hall closet, the one with old printed photographs. The smell of paper and time rose up as I lifted the lid. I carried it to the dining table and began sorting through pictures. There I was at 25, holding baby Sarah on one hip and balancing a pot roast with the other. There I was standing at the sidelines of Michael's game, mud on my shoes, clapping like he was the only child on the field. Photo after photo told the same story. I had been the steady place for all of them. Then I found it. It was a simple shot, me sitting on the living room floor, both children leaning against me, their heads on my shoulders, their eyes closed. Someone had snapped it while we all fell asleep watching a movie. If any picture told the truth about my place in this family, it was that one. I set it aside, separate from the rest. That afternoon, instead of waiting for my phone to buzz, I put on my nicer sweater and walked to the bus stop. At the bank, I asked the young clerk to help me review my accounts. I wasn't planning anything drastic. I just wanted to know, really know, what I had and what I could rely on that didn't depend on anybody else's mood. Then I stopped by the community center and picked up a flyer for a watercolor class that met on Thursday mornings. I slipped it into my purse like something fragile and precious. On Friday, I called the church office and asked if they still needed volunteers to pack food boxes. "We'd love to have you, Lydia," the woman said. "We always need steady hands." "I have those," I replied, and heard a little humor in my own voice. These were not big, dramatic changes. No one else would have seen them as important. But inside me, something was shifting. I wasn't just waiting anymore. A week later, the shoebox still sat open on my dining table. The special photo lay on top. I kept coming back to it, touching the worn edges, studying the younger version of myself half dozing between my children. I knew then what I wanted to share. I took the photo to the library and asked the librarian to help me scan it. The picture appeared on the screen, a little grainy, but full of warmth. "That's a sweet moment," she said. "It was," I answered. "And it still is." Back home, I sat at my kitchen table with my phone. I opened the app one knew my children checked 100 times a day. I uploaded the scanned picture and stared at the caption field for a long time. I didn't write anything angry. I didn't mention the no drama chat or how it felt to see my name removed. Instead, I typed slowly. Before there were group chats and busy schedules, there was just a mother who loved being the place her children could lean. I'm still that woman, even if life looks different now. I read it twice, then added one more line. This will be the last photo I post for a while. My door and my heart are still open, whether the notifications are or not. My finger hovered over the share button. For a moment, I almost deleted it. Old habits die hard, especially the habit of staying quiet. Then I thought about that younger woman in the photo, holding 2 sleeping children like they were her whole world. She hadn't done all of that just to disappear politely. So I pressed share. I didn't know if my family would ever notice the difference. But I did. And for the first time in a long time, that felt like enough, at least for now. I put the phone face down on the table and went about my day. The dryer buzzed. I folded towels. I watered the plant by the kitchen window, pinching off one brown leaf that had been hanging on too long. When I finally picked up the phone again, there were several notifications. A few old church friends had left little hearts under the photo. Mrs. Jenkins had written, "You've always had the warmest lap in the neighborhood, Lydia." I smiled at that. There was no comment from Sarah. None from Michael. But I noticed something else. A small message bubble sat at the top of my screen. Not in the old family chat, and not in whatever no-drama place they'd made without me. It was a private message from Sarah. "Mom, can I come by tonight?" it read. "Alone?" My first instinct was to type of course with 3 exclamation marks. Instead, I set the phone down and took a slow breath. That evening, when Sarah walked into my kitchen, she looked more like the little girl from the photo than I'd seen in years. Her shoulders drooped. Her eyes were red around the edges. She sat down at the table without taking off her coat. "I saw the picture," she said. I waited. "It popped up while I was in line at the grocery store," she continued. "I had to go sit in my car for 15 minutes before I could go in." Her voice wobbled on the last word. "I wasn't trying to make you cry," I said softly. "I know," she whispered. "That's what made it worse." For a while, the only sound was the refrigerator humming and someone's dog barking faintly down the street. "Mom," Sarah finally said, "about the chat, about everything." She twisted her hands together on the table. "Michael and we thought we were just reducing pressure. Less guilt if we didn't answer right away. We started another thread and it just became the main one. We told ourselves you didn't like all the noise anyway." She looked up at me then, eyes full of something between shame and fear. "But seeing that photo, and what you wrote, I realized we didn't reduce pressure. We erased you. And her voice broke. "That's not who I ever wanted to be." I watched my daughter struggle for words, the same girl who had once run to me with scraped knees and tangled hair. "I don't want you to beg for crumbs of our attention," she said. "You shouldn't have to." "I won't," I replied. My voice surprised us both with how steady it sounded. "Not anymore." Her eyes widened, but she nodded slowly. "I'm still your mother," I continued. "I still love you, and the children, with everything I have. My door will always be open. My phone will always be on. But I won't sit here and measure my worth by how many times it pings." A tear slipped down Sarah's cheek. "You shouldn't," she said. "You're worth so much more than that." She reached across the table hesitantly, like she wasn't sure she had the right. I placed my hand over hers. Her fingers were cooler than I remembered. "We added you back," she said quietly. "To the main chat. No more no drama anything. I told Michael it was a stupid name anyway. But, if you don't want to be in it, I'll understand." I thought of the empty afternoons, the frozen cookies, the doll in my closet. I thought of the watercolor class flyer on my counter and the food boxes I had packed at church the day before. "I'll be in it," I said. "But it's not going to be the only room I live in." Tomorrow I still had food boxes to pack and a watercolor class flyer waiting on my counter. Sarah let out a breath that sounded like it had been trapped in her chest for years. Emma and Noah came by that weekend. Emma spotted the printed version of the photo sitting in a new frame on my shelf. "Is that you and Mom and Uncle Michael?" she asked, walking closer. "Yes," I said. "That was a long time ago. We used to fall asleep like that watching movies." Emma studied the picture, then came over and leaned gently against my shoulder. "I still like falling asleep on you," she murmured. Something in my chest loosened. Later that evening, after everyone left, the house was quiet again. But it was a different kind of quiet. My phone buzzed on the table. I didn't reach for it right away. I poured myself a cup of tea, the kind with a little cinnamon that I saved for company. This time, I decided I was company enough. When I finally picked up the phone, there was a message in the family chat. It was a new photo, Emma and Noah sitting on my couch, grinning, their heads tipped toward each other. Underneath it, Sarah had written, "Back where it all began." A few thumbs up icons appeared as Michael and Laura reacted. I smiled, sent a small heart, and set the phone back down. Outside, a light rain had started, tapping softly against the window. In my little kitchen, the plant by the sink glistened with fresh drops from its watering. New leaves had begun to curl open along one stem, a tender green unfurling toward the light. I touched one of the leaves gently. Once, I thought my whole worth lived inside that glowing rectangle of glass, where my name could be erased with a tap. Now, I knew better. I was more than a contact to be added or removed. I was a woman who had built a life, who could still choose how to live the days she had left. Being included in a chat felt nice. But being included in my own life, that was where the real healing began. If this story touched your heart, you're welcome to stay a while. There's room here for anyone who has ever been treated like a burden, yet still chooses to hold their head high.